Lost immigrants, neoliberal capitalism is lapping at your doorstep. I'm sure many of you have heard the news about Greg Abbott and DeSantis busing immigrants from one part of the country to the next in an attempt to mock Democrats. And I am sure you have read through the comments of videos and stories, seeing how much hate there is towards migrants and left politicians, which shows how half of Americans truly feel about people coming to this country illegally. Unfortunately, the comments show that racism is still alive and well in America, especially in the South and rural areas of America. The comments show clearly that Americans are extremely reactionary and do not have the critical thinking skills to think about the systemic issues that are causing migrants to come here in the first place. And they lack the foresight that perhaps one day they themselves will be boarding buses, planes, or packing up their cars and moving for better opportunity, becoming economic migrants and refugees due to things beyond their control. A death in the family, an accident, an illness, or loss of a job could quickly find you as a first world refugee in as little as 1 month. So many of you are oblivious to how close you could become down and out. What Americans don't seem to understand is that mass immigration from poorer parts of the world to America, as well as other wealthy countries, is a natural repercussion of free market capitalism. Decades and centuries of colonial and corporate expansionism have allowed the wealthier countries to go in and physically conquer or financially manipulate lesser advanced countries into economic and government subjugation. As those countries' wealth and labor resources were extracted, comparatively little wealth was left to better the exploited country, and in many cases led to economic instability and deep corruption. See the many examples of American intervention in South America and India by the British for prime examples. So for decades, those people exploited by Western powers have had their lands and wealth extracted, no fault of their own, forced to live in desperation. And when they hear of America and see it on the TV or the internet, they think of escaping abject poverty and coming to America for a better life. Ironically, American capitalist advertising knows no bounds, enticing the poor of distant lands to flee their countries to come to America. So if you redneck GOP Republican types want to stop brown people from coming to America, stop advertising your products and culture overseas and saying America #1. 'Cause people are going to see that and want it. For all you myopic redneck racist Republicans, go watch some videos of how people live in South America, the Middle East, and Africa. And when people like that see how you ungrateful Americans live, like kings and queens with running water and lights at the flick of the switch, AC, cars, computers, and nice clothes, do you wonder why they want to escape hunger, living in dirt floor shacks, open sewers with nowhere to go? And I have not even started about living in lands full of gang and drug violence and dictatorships and regimes where saying one wrong thing would get you and your family killed. Many of those countries are like that because of 20th and 21st century neoliberal capitalism spearheaded by the United States. STFU when you say those brown people are backwards, uneducated heathens and can't fend for themselves, and I don't want them bringing that crap here. It was global capitalists who caused those conditions under economic exploitation, keeping them poor and underdeveloped. So go shove you elite white nationalism up your SS. To those people making all those awful comments towards migrants and displaying their political support for disgusting politicians playing games with human lives, all those dirty brown people coming to your pristine white lands are a consequence of being at the business end of American and global neoliberal capitalism. They did not have any choice in the matter when they had their lands invaded by capitalist profiteers. Did they get a vote and a say to let Western powers and corporations muscle their way into their country? Did the working class poor have a vote in having their nation's wealth and labor usurped by Western powers? Did they have a say as their capitalist corrupted leaders sold them out to international banks and the IMF under deceitful loans? Nope. See, all you capitalists want the benefits of capitalism, but you do not want to deal with the consequences of capitalism like migration and climate change. You can't have your capitalism and run from it too. So these people leave their shithole countries, leaving friends and family. They risk their lives, crossing open seas and crossing hot parched deserts. They risk smugglers, suffocating and dying, locked in the back of an 18-wheeler. They risk entering a country with people of a totally different color and language who hate them. This takes bravery and tenacity. And I ask you, who so comfortably sit in your American home living like a king or queen, born in America by pure happenstance, passing judgment on brave people coming here, risking everything. Have you ever known poverty? Have you ever truly been hungry? Have you had your family murdered by a regime? Have you ever lived in a shack? Have you ever been homeless? What have you ever risked? Have you ever tried to live in a country where people hate you? In a country where you don't speak the language? And you Americans just love your tough, rugged individualism and your pull yourself up by your bootstrapism, just so long as you are white. Migrants are the epitome of tough, rugged individualism and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and yet you despise them for the courage and steel balls they have to risk everything. Migrants are the epitome of America's sacrifice and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and yet you disrespect that. Seems to me you are just projecting your own shortcomings or laziness, and you don't like it if someone beneath you tries to better themselves. Technological unemployment, the great humbler. This political stunt pulled by Greg Abbott and DeSantis are sick representations of the dark reality permeating through America. While I am not shocked, for I accepted we are all disposable commodities for the ruling ownership class decades ago, it is a pretty overt example of American racism and inhumanity and capitalist commoditization of human life, especially from the Republican Christian South. I lived in Texas for decades and I know the culture too well, and it is disgusting, and this busing of migrants really is emblematic of Texas and Southern culture and the sickness of how capitalism commodifies anyone and anything at any time by anyone who can figure out how. First, I want to point out a huge Texas-sized hypocrisy with Texas when it comes to immigrants. Texas business secretly love migrants because they are cheap, quick and disposable labor pool. From the day laborers hanging out near the taco stands and home improvement stores to the big multinationals in upscale parts of Dallas and Houston, they all use this labor force, until when politicians start playing migrant games for political posturing, then companies will dismiss those illegals to save face and pretend they are anti-immigration, as well as avert any legal issues when ICE may look into their companies. Until all the political rhetoric dies down, which then they will hire them back. Easy come, easy go. It's pretty disgusting, the Texas hypocrisy, second only to Texas freedom-loving nature, which practically bans women from having abortions now. Another thing with these morons in Texas and other southern states is they do not know their history. Texans are taught to be proud of Texas in their history class, where Davy Crockett, William Travis and Jim Bowie were godlike figures who fended off hordes of evil Mexicans at the Alamo, and it was Texans' manifest destiny to take over their lands, which was actually part of northern Mexico, land granted to them by the Mexican government to use and develop. But white settlers wanted it for themselves and were the intrusive immigrants that Mexico had a hard time controlling white immigration. So eventually all these white uppity immigrants revolted against their agreements with Mexico, and they fought a regional war, territorial claim, over it and won. Texas culture believes in might makes right but forgets that, in the grand scale of history, things change, and coming on nearly 2 centuries later after Texas independence, 1836, Texas is browning, much to white GOP's dismay, and they can do nothing to stop it. Hence Texas and southern states' ever-increasing political radicalization and actions. So now you know why Texas banned abortion, cause they need more white babies to fight the browning of Texas. Coming back to present times, haven't we grown tired of that old argument of immigrants taking our jobs? It is a tired one that is no longer valid and absolutely farthest from the truth, intentionally done so for manipulative political reason, for which I am about to completely obliterate. Immigrants are taking our jobs. I have heard this spouted off by people with 3 brain cells for far too long. No, you schmucks, immigrants are not taking your jobs. Well, unless you work in a laundromat, kitchen, as a janitor, as a construction worker, at a car wash, or picking fruit. Immigrants are not taking your middle-class jobs, nor are those streaming over the border are taking your high-class jobs. Actually, America has to bring in people from places like China, India and Europe to fill high-end jobs in fields like medicine, engineering and tech, because white Americans are not willing to work hard to get in these positions. Not to mention that the backward southern public education systems that churn out truckloads of turnips who do not have the academic capabilities or discipline to get into engineering and medicine in the first place. And I remind you, the South is filled with multi-million-dollar football stadiums where football and sports are the most important things. That should tell you that academics are not really that important in Southern, especially Texas, culture. But I am starting to slide off course. Correlation versus causation, you be the judge. As you Americans know, America started to deindustrialize back in the 70s and industry was routed for decades. We all know what happened to Detroit and Pennsylvania and Ohio. We all knew someone who lost a job when it went to Mexico or China. You may have even lost your own. Your ruling ownership class started down the neoliberal capitalist path so they could make even more money, and frankly didn't care about the effects upon the American working class when they took away your jobs. And let me remind you, these are your own white Christian kind selling you out for the bottom dollar. So listen up, you fools. It was your own white fellow American who took your job away and gave it to a bunch of brown people in some country you cannot point out on the map. 5 decades of neoliberal capitalism have run their course, and now the repercussions of neoliberal capitalism are lapping upon America's doorstep, and you don't like it. Not in my backyard. Well, like the ocean, neoliberal capitalism's externalities don't care about your feelings, bigotry, and political views. Decades of neoliberal capitalism are causing the waves of mass migrations, now exacerbated by climate change, due to capitalism, to lap upon the shores of wealthy nations. So sorry that you don't like capitalism's externalities of human garbage washing upon your beautiful beaches, filling them up with unsightly black and brown people who will pollute your castile culture. So when these kinds of desperate migrant peoples do find their way here, you tend to blame them for coming here while not taking a few minutes to understand why they came here in the first place. It is too hard for you to think in terms of economic cause and effect, or you'd rather try to deny cause and effect. Or you would rather succumb to emotionally reactionary responses whipped up by your flavor of media and cult of personalities MAGA morons who tap into your hate for people unlike you, falsely believing they are here to destroy your culture, take your jobs, or rape and murder you. Or it is too hard for you to accept that it is capitalism that is the cause for this brown tide you can't wash off your conscience and front porch. To all those people full of hatred for migrants and love for politicians who do stupid like busing migrants out of state, I have a message for you. One day, in the next 2 decades, you yourself or your kids may very well be just like one of those poor immigrants you hate. Neoliberal capitalism and technological unemployment will spare no one, not even you, the white gawd-fearing Republican capitalist. You need to take your cultural chauvinism and shove it up your ass or throw it in the trash and realize this: technology is going to wipe out hundreds of millions of jobs in the next 20 years. It is technological unemployment that is going to cause even more mass migration from poorer countries to wealthier countries, and it will be technological unemployment that will decimate what is left of the few remaining good jobs in America. You already see the beginnings of things to come with the self-serve checkouts and kiosks. In 20 years, where are all you self-righteous God-appointed natural-born blessed Americans going to work when you have no or low skills? Where are you middle-class workers going to go and work when corporations have AI-ed and automated your low-end white-collar jobs away? Do you have enough money stashed away for that, when you are already living hand-to-mouth as it is? Can you retrain yourself to become a software engineer at 35? 45? 55? If so, how are you going to fight ageism and sexism? Do you even have the money to go back to school to get that required degree so you can get your foot in the door? Your ruling elite ownership class, Republicans, Democrats, all the CEOs and boards of directors and big investors and banks know what is coming, and they really don't care about the coming tsunami of technological unemployment that will wash away American jobs. They do not have any plan in place on any front. The American public school system is woefully behind in STEM. There are no job retraining programs in place for older workers. There are no social safety nets in place for the soon-to-be technologically displaced. Neither the free market nor the government are doing anything to mitigate the coming technological unemployment tsunami. They just assume that the masses will figure it out, and likely they will just profit off it by forcing even more educational debt onto those who want to go to school to retrain, or exploiting people who want to live off of state assistance or corporate UBI. The next 20 years are going to be a mess when fewer and fewer middle class are left as AI and automation take over the jobscape. And there will be a huge gap between the 99.99999% and the 0.00001% with very few left in between. I suggest you learn how to code or do something in tech now. Technological unemployment will be the great humbler, which will put a lot of you uneducated, hateful anti-immigrationists in your place. Not until you have known financial hardship will you have a clue what desperation is like. You will not know what it is like to have no job and no income, losing everything and finding yourself out on the street or living with friends or relatives due to circumstances beyond your control, no matter how hard you try, because there are no jobs for you, aside from mopping floors, which you will not do since it is beneath you. It will only be when technological unemployment, brought upon by your own white God-fearing Christian capitalist, comes to your doorstep and washes away your life, it will only be then will you finally shut up and be forced to walk a mile in another's desperate shoes. But be thankful you have a head start in that you just so happen to be born in America. You speak the language and you have a skin color that white people just don't automatically hate you by. That, my free market capitalist lovers, is how capitalism works. So either start saving for your bus tickets or learn STEM.